As a longtime fan of the Fallout series, dating back to when it was released in the 90s, I've longed for a remake or a remaster of the classic Fallout games, Fallout 1 and 2, for quite some time now. And though it seemed unlikely in many cases, even though with the purchase that Microsoft has made of Bethesda and ZeniMax with people like Brian Fargo, Fergus Urquhart, and the rest of some of the Fallout crew now under the same umbrella with Microsoft, it does still seem unlikely. This also comes from things like Todd Howard saying that he wouldn't want to see the classic Fallout games be remastered because he wants people to experience them the way that they're supposed to be experienced. This is one of the handful of times that I've completely agreed with something Todd Howard has said, but if you want to be one of the handful of people that I completely agree with all the time, subscribe to the channel now for more Fallout content like this. I also do other video game documentaries, but we mainly cover Fallout here. You wouldn't want to be left in the dark when it comes to any juicy Fallout video essays. While I agree with what Todd Howard has said, he's also expressed disinterest in remastering things as a whole. I know that people call up Skyrim and be like, oh, well, what about Skyrim? But I mean other projects. He doesn't seem to be focused or, wanting to send the team to be focused on things like remakes and remasters. But though I do agree with the classic Fallout argument about they should be experienced the way that they are, and you should experience them that way because they're so special, I also believe that it's a detriment to the actual games that they're not being remade right now, because a lot of people seem to be put off by the UI, the turn-based combat, all of those things. It seems archaic to them. It doesn't seem like something that they want to get into, and the people who do actually jump in and get the games for themselves and check them out, they seem almost lost sometimes. Maybe they refuse to look up a guide, or they don't know really about turning down the difficulty settings, but there seems to be a huge learning curve with people who are new to the games, who have started with things like Fallout 3 or Fallout 4, and they want to experience the classic Fallout stories. They want to check out these games, see where their favorite series came from, and they find it hard to do because the game is A, hard to get into for new people, B, has a pretty strong learning curve, and C, seems archaic, like I said, to those who are new to it. This is an actual travesty, as the classic Fallout games hold some of the best stories when it comes to the main plot, especially in the entire Fallout universe. You'll struggle to find better writing when it comes to the main plots in the entirety of the series, and that includes New Vegas. I think New Vegas is the pinnacle of the Fallout series, but the classic Fallout games, they couldn't rely on 3D graphics. They couldn't rely on amazing visuals. They couldn't rely on the graphical things that we can nowadays. 10 years later, 20 years later, nearly 30 years later, moving on from that era of gaming, there's no way that they can compete with them on a technical level. But when it comes to writing, that's what they had to rely on. They had to rely on a bit of humor in their writing. They had to rely on it really telling the story through some text. There's a lot of reading in the classic Fallout games, and this is also where a lot of people get turned off. And I think that we could remake Fallout 1 and 2, but there is a bit of a hiccup. That hiccup is a lot of people that I've talked to seem to think that the classic Fallout games could be too dark or maybe even inappropriate to be remastered when it comes to modern day. This is, I think, a decent argument, but it's not one that I think completely throws Fallout, the classic Fallout games, out of the running for a remake or a remaster, and I'm going to get into why. First, I want to talk about the two ways that I think Fallout could be remastered, the classic games. You could either go the way of Bethesda, where you take 1 and 2, Fallout 1 and 2, and you remake them in the newest Bethesda engine. So with like Fallout 4's engine around there. And we have mod authors who are doing that work, and we don't know when the projects are going to be released. It takes an incredible amount of work to do something like that, but we do have people out there in the universe that are trying to make that a possibility through mods. The other option I don't hear people talk about as much, but I think it might be the one that I prefer the most. It would be taking Fallout 1 and 2 and remaking them similarly to the way they are already. So keeping the trimetric, most people call it isometric view from the first two games, keeping the turn-based combat, but sprucing it up a bit, making the graphics better, more modern day, because we have games like that. And we actually have a game series under the Microsoft umbrella from somebody who worked on the classic Fallout games, and one of the founders of the Fallout games, Brian Fargo, when it comes to the Wasteland series. Now, with Wasteland 2, I wasn't the biggest fan. There was a lot of reading, and I was playing it on console, and I, like a lot of people, talk about 1 and 2 when it comes to Fallout. That's how I talked about Wasteland 2 when I played it. Like I said, also played it on the Xbox One, so I felt like a lot of the experience was taken away from me because it's very clearly a PC game. Mouse and keyboard preferred, in my opinion, with games like that. But then you fast forward to the improvements that Wasteland 3 have made with their game. Wasteland 3 has fully voiced everybody, fully voiced NPCs. Everybody you talk to has a voice, so they talk to you. And this is something, when I see stuff like that, I really start to daydream about possibly getting Fallout 1 and 2 in inXile's Wasteland 3 engine, or whatever, however they made that, having inXile take a crack at remaking Fallout 1 and 2 the same way that Wasteland 3 functions. Now, of course, it wouldn't quite be the exact same because Wasteland's more of a squad based, like, I wouldn't call it an RTS, but it's similar, you know what I mean? And Fallout is more of like a single player RPG, but you can get companions and things of that nature. But it would translate just fine, and it would look phenomenal because the visuals in Wasteland 3 look great. But having Fallout 1 and 2 be remade with all of the NPCs being voiced, I think would be a huge improvement to the classic games, and I think would also open the door for a lot of people. They wouldn't feel like they had to read the whole time they were playing, and that is a huge turnoff to a lot of people, a lot more than you think it is. But again, a lot of people have told me that they think it's far too inappropriate or dark to remaster or remake the classic Fallout games, and I do understand where they're coming from, because the classic Fallout games do touch on some very dark post-apocalyptic things that happen in the post-apocalypse. Now, a lot of them you see in newer Fallout games. You see slavery in newer Fallout games. You see child labor in newer Fallout games. You see violence, death, destruction, all of those things. But a lot of people seem to think that for some reason the classic Fallout games are just far too inappropriate to translate into that. And they bring up you can become a porn star in New Reno. They bring up that children can be killed in the classic Fallout games, which, by the way, Bethesda patched out in the Steam version of the classic Fallout games. And though a lot of people do have an issue with it, where it's like, they did keep one child death scene in, which is the Frank Horrigan, discovering the family in the wasteland, and the Enclave blows them away. There's a child in that, and it does keep the child death scene in there. So Bethesda clearly understands the gravity of the storytelling when it does come to that, and doesn't censor that entirely, though you aren't allowed to kill children yourselves. When there used to be a child killer perk in the classic Fallout games, that is removed in the Steam games because you can't kill them. In Fallout 1, they pretty much outright remove children altogether, but because they can't do that in Fallout 2, because they're kind of pivotal to the plot, in the den with the pickpockets, and then also with Frank Horrigan in the desert, they can't really remove them that way. So instead, when you try to kill them in the Steam version of Fallout 2, the death animation doesn't play, and you might get the child killer perk, but I don't even know if it registers. Regardless of how that works, obviously, if it was these games were to be remade in the newest Bethesda engine, whatever they were working on, Fallout 4's engine even, children wouldn't be killable. That's something that they have always done. And possibly, if they were remade that way, the Frank Horrigan scene may be also censored, even though I think it's very pivotal to the plot to show that Frank Horrigan is so, like, nefarious, like I would use that term, like he does not care for anything else other than his mission, so much that he is willing to kill women and children over it. And I think that that's a very pivotal point of the Enclave in Fallout 2. But say they censored that and he just like cut down a man and his wife or something like that, it wouldn't be the same gravity, but it would still get across the message. It's not something I'm advocating for, but this is something that we would probably see the types of censorship in, like a Fallout 2 remake that was licensed by Bethesda, made by Bethesda Softworks, something along that nature. Now, beyond that, there are some things that classic Fallout touches on that, newer Fallouts kind of dance around, but they don't really jump into as much as classic Fallout did. Now, in Fallout 2, there is a young girl who is assumedly a young teen, or, not preteen. I feel like she's in her mid-teens, 14, 15 years old. And some of the cons outside of Vault 15 have been sexually assaulting her inside of a room. And, these are adult raiders that are doing this to her, and so it's implied pedophilia, it's implied sexual assault, and all she tells you about the story. You don't see these things, but she tells you about it through dialogue and things of that nature. When you bring her back to her mom, you hear a bit about it, and that's something that you don't see a whole lot of in the newer Fallout games, but it does exist. There are pedophiles in New Vegas that are doing nefarious things to children inside one of the cities, and there's also sexual assault in New Vegas as well. Of course, this is coming from the people who made the classic Fallout games, so they're maybe a little bit, rougher with that. But these things exist in the Bethesda universe as well with Fallout. And of course, with New Vegas, the sexual assault I'm referring to is Betsy inside the NCR. But even though, again, it's explained through dialogue, it isn't shown, it's done well, it's written well, and these things in the classic Fallout games are also written well. They're written with nuance, they're written with respect, and they're written with the type of bleakness that comes with the post-apocalypse, and it kind of sets that scene. Now, whether or not these types of things would be censored, I'm not sure. It really depends on how they're put out there, which is why I would more advocate for Fallout 1 and 2 to be remade in the style of Wasteland 3, because I feel like you would get away with censoring less when you deal with the isometric view. And the reason I think that you get away with more with the isometric view is because in fully 3D realized Bethesda worlds, seeing Frank Horrigan mow down a whole family, including a young child, would be kind of horrifying, and it would look kind of crazy. It would look like a creepypasta or something. But in an isometric view like Wasteland 3, that can be depicted where it doesn't seem as violent. And though in Fallout 2, these characters get blown away, that can still happen in Wasteland 3, and it looks cartoonish. It doesn't look as real as maybe a Bethesda engine game would. It looks more like a video game, and that does make a difference. It absolutely makes a difference. It all is video games. It's not real violence anyway, and that is the way I look at video games and other media like movies and television shows. They're fiction. They're not real. So when you are dealing with them, I look at them as that. When it's just media, it's just pretend. It's for fun. It's for entertainment. Now, when those images can be distressing to people regardless if they're in a digital medium or not. So I can understand that being a little bit aggressive in a Bethesda game, but not being so aggressive if it was, presented the way Wasteland 3 is. Much like how we see it in classic Fallouts, because nowadays when we play through that, we get a laugh out of the NPC animations, the way it looks so crazy and unrealistic when they blow apart and everything's all gory and crazy. It's more comedic than it is horrifying, when it could have the opposite result with a Bethesda engine. To get to the point of the matter, there's nothing so bad in the classic Fallout games that they wouldn't be able to be released or remade or remastered in the modern day. They're literally sold on Steam right now in their current state, and there's no problems with it whatsoever. People go back and play them, people play them for the first time, and they're not so offended that they throw fits or anything like that. Sure, there's some things that are a little bit edgy. Absolutely, we're dealing with a post-apocalypse, and they try to set the scene, and they do it quite well. But there's nothing so bad that, say like the porn star stuff in New Reno, you wouldn't have to deal with it on the sense of seeing everything, because that doesn't even happen in the classic Fallouts anyway. You just get some dialogue, and then it's like, oh, you did a porn movie. And with Bethesda, it would fade to black and be like, oh, this is something that we see in Bethesda games anyway, not becoming a porn star, but dealing with prostitutes in New Vegas, there's sex scenes in Fallout, even in Fallout 4, but it's just a fade to black situation, and it's an implied sex scene. This is something that has been very common in video games, and Bethesda has done it a bunch, and classic Fallout did it as well, where it would just fade to black, come back, and then be like, oh, hey, you went with a prostitute, or hey, you went and did a porn movie. This is something that could be remade and remastered. It wouldn't be that big of a deal, and it would be able to stay in the game and not even be censored, because again, these things are not totally offensive to people, and they can be done with nuance and context and with a bit of humor most of the time, and they come off just fine. I guess to sum it up, I really think that we need to have a remake or a remaster of these games, because I feel like a lot of people are missing out on such a wonderful experience because they're put off by playing a game that feels archaic to them. Now, to me, because of my rose-tinted glasses, having grown up with the games, playing them in the 90s and loving them, and growing up with them, playing them all the time, they don't seem that way to me. And maybe to you, they don't either. But to some people, they just cannot get into them, and they cite the turn-based combat, they cite the isometric view, but I think those things can be cleaned up for a modern-day gaming experience that a lot of people would enjoy. But I want to thank you for listening to me rant about my favorite thing, the classic Fallout games. And again, if you enjoyed this and you want to see more things like it, subscribe to the channel and like the video so I know that you dig it. Plus, it helps it out a lot on the YouTube algorithm. You know how that goes. Also, I want to thank my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members, but a special shout out to my biggest supporters: Ian Raleigh, Abdullah Athani, Zeroster, JP Rivera, Fireflare, Papa Swanson, Marcus Jacobstown, Legendary Angel, Spencer Webb, Techie, Ruben Atwood, Phil Starsick, Billy Joe Jimbob, Bill Scott Sheets, Edgy, and Primark Mustard. Thank you guys so much for the support. I literally couldn't do this without you. I hope to catch you on the next one. It has been Mantis.
I gotta testify. Come up in the spot looking extra fly. For the day you die, you gon' touch the sky. You gon' touch the sky, baby girl. Testify. Come up in the spot looking extra fly. For the day you die, you gon' touch